I would like to begin by sharing with you some words that I believe are particularly appropriate for our gathering. They're from the British playwright Tom Stoppard. "If your aim is to change the world," he said, "journalism is the most immediate short-term weapon. By bringing to light problems that need to be solved, challenges that need to be met, and wrongs that need to be righted, journalism, in the best of our tradition, is a powerful, indispensable force for positive change." The honorees we recognize tonight have each shown a light on the issues affecting children and families in their own revealing, compelling ways.
The kind of journalism that we look for and that the judges look for is journalism whose strengths are a fresh take on important issues, on powerful, precise journalism and reporting, the scope of the reporting, and the narrative drive that can bring to life for readers, for viewers, and for listeners the real lives of real people facing real challenges and finding ways through. This kind of journalism is a classic of American reality, and the kinds of journalists who perform this and dedicate themselves to it, who can right wrongs, who have laws changed, who have reunited families, have done things for this country, which, as Mrs. Powell said, as Alma said, it's a first take, and it's a powerful take on who we really are.
Honoring people tonight who are telling stories that are meaningful, but it's also bringing to light stories that are all too often not being told in other places. This work matters. It unfolds the best traditions of our free press as more than just a chronicler of events, but as a catalyst to our national conscience. The more we tell it, the more we get the information out, the more I think we can actually make a difference in children's lives.
It was amazing to us how we could hear over and over about these infants who died while sleeping in large beds with one adult or two adults or three or four adults with lots of blankets and pillows, or they were found stuck between cushions in a couch. The adults were often passed out or drunk or high. And SIDS, as you may or may not know, is supposed to be an unpreventable death that is only declared after other things are all ruled out. And it became clear to us that that just had not happened, and that law enforcement hadn't always done their job to investigate. Grandparents mostly took us to the grave sites, these tiny little graves. One, for instance, had a marker with the name. You could barely read because the grass was grown over it. Another one was marked only without a name, only with a little whirligig toy that children have that was stuck in the grass. And these grandparents had believed from the start that something really went wrong and that law enforcement didn't take action appropriately because it was diagnosed as SIDS.
I think most people think of sex trafficking of children as something that happens somewhere else. But stories like this put a highlight on the fact that it's happening in a lot of our cities, in Boston and Washington and Atlanta. One of the girls who testified in this case told the prosecutors in court about how this is something that happens in all the main streets of America. And what also is really important about this story was not only that this is about victimization and the problems that are happening in those cities, but that things are happening and justice is being done and people are speaking out about it. This was about a group of young, amazing women who walked into court and pointed to their abusers and said, "This is not right, this is what happened to me," and told their stories and ended up putting 6 people into jail for long periods of time.
I think that sticking up for people who can't stick up for themselves is the most important thing that a journalist can do. My editor, Rick Christie, who's here at the table, grew up in the projects of South Florida. And he saw firsthand the good that government-funded programs like I wrote about could do in the communities. I think the idea that somebody would run a program so carelessly and with such indifference motivated him to give me more time and guidance and patience than I probably deserved for the story. And for that, I'm really grateful.
These are difficult stories to tell, and we must keep telling them. I mean, that's really like our charge going forward, even with all the mess with the economy and the changes with the webs and the ad dollars and everything else and the shrunken staffs. These are difficult stories, and we must continue to tell them.
With the freedom to write what the heck I wanted, ended up spending a lot of time at unemployment offices and social service agencies, food pantries, and seeing the complexity of all this, and seeing the government bureaucrats who weren't quite so mean, and the social service caseworkers in Illinois, in some cases, caseloads of 2,000 individuals placed in absolutely impossible situations.
I got the idea for the story in 2008 when I read a very small article in the Mexican newspaper about 90,000 children being deported back to Mexico without their parents. And at least 13,000 of those kids were never reunited with their families. So I got curious about, what happens to children when they get sent back to Mexico.
I was working on a book about finances of the Catholic Church. And I was in Rome in the summer of 2009. And I found out he had given $15,000 to Cardinal Sodano, the Secretary of State of the Vatican, who put pressure on the office that should have prosecuted him. There was another priest who got $90,000. There was another Vatican cardinal. They remodeled his apartment. And so for all the years that he was trailed with these accusations, he was, feathering the nest of people who should have put him away.
Innocent victims of gang violence happens here every day. And the tragedy is, I told this story in Los Angeles, but it can be told in any city of the United States. And we spend a lot of time covering death and carnage in Afghanistan and Iraq, but there is an unspoken war that's happening in our own country that I hope more people will pay attention to.
Homeless families with children are the fastest growing they're the fastest growing segment of the homeless population. They're also the least visible. In our series, Invisible Families, we aim to bring them into the light. From the very beginning of our reporting, we took a multimedia approach, choosing the best story for each medium. Our social issues reporter dug deep into the system, researching holes in the safety nets. Our community news partners offered local and first-person accounts to explain family homelessness at a neighborhood level. Our photography and multimedia storytelling offered in-depth personal profiles, giving voice to the mothers, fathers, and the children at the heart of this nearly invisible issue. I'm proud of the work that our team was able to accomplish. I'm honored to work with these families, and I'm very thankful to the Journalism Center for this award.
It's not often that teenagers like us, the homeless, the undocumented, the grieving, get to tell our stories in depth or even at all. We didn't think this would win any sort of award. We were just being ourselves and telling our stories. Thanks to NPR, we were able to broadcast our stories to across the state. And thanks to the Journalism Center on Children and Families, we were able to come together in Washington, D.C. and celebrate this work.
In this era of just shameless, tarnished reality television, to be able to do a solid piece of real work, real documentary work, is a gift. As remarkable as the children were, as the teenagers were in this story on schizophrenia, I think both of us would say that the parents were no less profound. The burdens that people carry and still carry on astounds me every day. And it's one of the gifts of journalism to be close to people and to watch that process. It is, despite all of the hardship and all the difficulties, a real tribute to human spirit that people do push on.
Just briefly, it started with a sentence in a magazine article about the federal government mandating that communities across America pay for transportation for homeless students. And so I started calling and I said, you know, are you paying for transportation? And all these big Kansas City schools with all this money was like, no, we've never heard of that. And so we finally called one school district in Kansas City, Kansas. And I will never forget the woman that answered the phone. She said, "Where have you been?"
Choosing among these medal winners, as you can imagine from hearing the synopses of the stories, was an amazingly difficult task.
It's very humbling to win an award on stories about people who are homeless.
I'll just say quickly, you know, look, in the policy world, in the public policy world, there's two kinds of people. There's frustrated politicians and there's frustrated journalists. And I'm the latter. And so I grew up admiring journalists, admiring people who hung out right here at this club, and the ability to do the things that you all are doing to make the world better. So I'm humbled to be here in your presence.
Go back to your newsrooms, go back to your editors, convince them of the importance of these stories, and together we will change the lives of the children and families who need us most. Thank you.